out that our new WAG member, Caitlin Scarano, is joining us today. So I think we should go around and do a check-in and just to, well, check in and see how each of you are doing. Caitlin, this is something we do usually at the beginning and at the end of each meeting. Kind of gives you an opportunity to share what's on your mind that might be useful for members to know. I'll go around the group and come back to you at the end and check in with you. But great to have you here and glad to have you on the team. So going around, Dan Paul, how are you today?
Hey guys, doing good. Good to see everyone. And it's kind of a little bit of craziness here in the morning with my kid getting ready for school and stuff. So I might have to get in and out to help him, but otherwise happy to see everybody and doing well. And welcome, Caitlin.
Thanks, Dan. I love the beard too, man. I'm jealous. I don't think I could do that.
You'd be surprised if you don't do anything, what you could do.
Lisa, how's your internet connection? Doing okay?
Yeah, we'll see. It's very iffy, but I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Great. Paula?
Hey, good morning, everyone. I apologize for not turning my camera on. For some reason, I might need to reload the Zoom software or something, but it's not letting me turn my video on. So I'm not being deliberately evasive there. But I'm doing good. I have been down in Florida for a couple of weeks now, helping my parents get ready to move. I got them to agree to move to Olympia, which I'm really excited about. So my sister and I are here helping them sort through stuff that they don't need anymore. And it's just good to lay eyes on them. We went through a very elaborate quarantine process and got COVID tested before we left, and stayed away from them for 6 days, except for seeing them in the backyard with masks on. And then we got COVID tested again, and then we're able to get in there and get to work. So I've been here in the 90% humidity weather for longer than I'd like, and I'm looking forward to getting home in a few days. But it's been good to see them and get them pointed my direction.
Well, that's nice to hear, Paula, and good luck too, because that's quite an adventure in itself, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Bill, how about you? So snowflakes, I heard you say. I see you, Bill, but I don't know if you can hear me.
I can now, I think. My computer kicked out for a second. So I guess you called my name while I wasn't on, so.
Probably. I was just, go ahead.
All right, well, no, everything's doing fine out here. My wife borrowed my computer, so if I turn the video off, you'll see a picture of her waving some money around. I'm sure there's a story there, but I don't know it yet. I'll try to figure it out. So we're doing fine.
All right, thank you, Bill. Dave Duncan, good morning. Dave, if you're talking, I think you're on mute. Did you figure out the button, Dave, or let me see if I could help you. Well, Dave, there we go. I'll circle back to you, Dave, and maybe see if you can.
What about now?
Hey, now we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, it's a beautiful day here today. My goodness, there's not a cloud in the sky. Wind's blowing a little bit. Got the last 2 truckloads of calves shipped yesterday, so that's always a relief. So.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear you're doing okay.
Yeah.
Morning, Lynn. How are you today? I'm having trouble hearing you, Lynn. I see you're unmuted, but
can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay. I said good morning and welcome to the commissioners. I don't have anything terribly exciting to report. I'm just happy to be here and start working on the new language. So we'll get going pretty soon.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Sammy, how are you today?
I am good. We've been gathering cows, ours and the neighbors and mine and everybody's seems like. So once we get done with this call, I got a call for a stray calf that got left when we moved cows home. So I got to go see if I can locate her. And we met Dave's trucks headed home last night. So lots of cattle on the move at the moment. It's that time of year.
All right. Well, good luck with all of that. Thanks, Sammy. Jessica.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Yeah, I'm doing well. We're expecting snow on the valley floor later this week, so I'm excited about that. And yeah, I've been seeing lots of cattle around too, which is kind of fun and, you know, interesting to see people doing Sammy's job basically, and big trucks hauling up and down our road trying to find the last few to bring them in. So that's neat. Yeah, I'm getting ready for winter.
Yeah, fall's here, that's for sure. Thanks, Jessica. Tom, good morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Maybe as a reminder that nothing that we do is done in a vacuum. I had the opportunity to speak to the Senate, the House, or the Senate Ag Committee here in Olympia yesterday virtually, and they were looking for just an update on what's going on in agriculture and how COVID-19 has impacted what we do. And one of the things I shared with them was from USDA just came out with their latest economic numbers, and they're looking at a 3% decrease in farm income nationally for this year is the most updated estimate. And that's $18 million, what they're figuring, $18 million below the 10-year average. So it just gives you a sense of what our farmers and ranchers are facing right now. And COVID, you know, that was before COVID-19.
Oh, wow.
So it just gives you a perspective of you know, the people we represent, what they're facing. So it's good to see everybody.
You too, Tom. Thank you. All right. Let's go. So we have a number of department reps here. Donnie, I think you've given us some insight on what you're dealing with. Don't know if you want to take time to check in now or just wave me off and I'll go to the next department staff member.
No, that works. Yeah, now we got more folks. I'm gonna apologize. I'm at home waiting for test results from this little girl COVID test, and she's doing healthy, so I think we're okay. But so I'm on dad duty until my wife gets home this afternoon, and so I'm gonna be a fly on the wall. I just wanted to also kind of thank you for commissioners to be able to join today. You know, WAG members with the commission becoming more involved and rulemaking ahead kind of thing and all that. I thought it would be good to kind of bring the two entities together and a crosswalk between WAG and commission. So thank you, commissioners. And I know that a lot of these kinds of cases, you all to kind of listen and take it all in. And if I could twist your virtual arm a little bit, if you're able to participate and join in the discussion, that would be awesome. So I will do what I can to participate in the call. So thanks so much. And Paula, good news about your parents coming to Olympia. So that was good to hear.
Thank you, Donnie. Julia, how are you?
Great. I'm really happy that we are meeting now and a little bit earlier than our scheduled November meeting to hopefully keep our efforts moving forward. So I'm happy to be here and happy to see you all. And yes, thank you, commissioners, for joining this meeting.
Thank you, Julia. Steve, good morning.
Good morning, Rob. Good morning, everybody. Doing well. Fall is here, favorite time of year. Not like Jessica, I'm not ready to rush to winter yet. I'm still going to enjoy fall. But but the air is crisp and cold, and we've got a few snowflakes up here in Northeast, and it feels pretty good. So looking forward to today's meeting. Again, yeah, it is great having the commissioners' participation. Donnie, if there's anything that you need specifically for me, just let me know for some help today if I can help you out. Certainly look forward to participating. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Candace, how about you? How are you doing?
I am good. I am excited for the kind of different parts of the weather. Like I was telling Bill, yeah, we're getting snow right now. It's probably not going to stick, but it looks like it's going to be in the low teens for temperature for about a week. So that's exciting. So yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited to get feedback on the subcommittee stuff. And so looking forward to that a lot.
Thanks, Candace. Nice to see you. Joey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. It's been, this fall's been a little slower. So I've got to spend a lot of time with my 3 grandkids, and I got the 4th granddaughter on the way in 2.5 weeks. So
wow.
Looking forward to that. And thanks all the WAG members for, joining here today and taking the time. I really appreciate that. And our commissioners, same thing, thanks for joining us on this call.
Yeah, thank you, Joey. And congratulations with the granddaughter. All right, Scott, good morning.
Morning, Rob. Glad to be here. I kind of pop in and out of the WAG world periodically. I don't think I've been on a call for last couple of times, but always interested in the stuff that WAG's working on, and just glad to be here.
Thank you, Scott. And Kevin, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. From the virtual second row, it's good to see WAG members and commissioners join us today. I guess at your meeting. So happy to be here. I'm like Scott. I'm available if you need me, and otherwise I'll just sit here in the virtual second row quietly.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And if members remember, we have a relatively new note taker to help us keep track of what we say, Katie. So Katie, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here again with you all. It's been since August, so looking forward to taking notes for you again. And I'm enjoying the cold weather, and I have my tea next to me, so ready to see what you guys get accomplished today.
Thanks for being there, Katie, and helping us out. And so Caitlin, our new WAG member. Caitlin, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm in Bellingham this morning, and we do not have snow. I'll talk about temperatures in the teens. But yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm excited to participate. This will be like my first time. So it's great.
Well, great. Well, we're glad to have you, and look forward to hearing what you think. So commissioners, as a way to reinforce Donnie's encouragement of your participation, I'd like to go around just check in with you as well and see how you're doing. So how about Commissioner Linville? How are you today?
Oh, good morning. I'm a little sleep deprived. This is a big week on the ranch. So we wean calves at this time of year. And it's also modern firearm season for deer, and which makes it pretty busy around here. And we had a fun deal. My college roommate's son passed Hunter Ed last year, and he called me and asked if he could hunt on the ranch this year. And I told him as long as he spent some time at the range that he could, and he did that. And he came out and with his dad, and his dad didn't carry a rifle. It was just for the young man, and he hiked into some really rugged country, and he got a really nice 4-point mule deer. And it was just cool to see how excited he was. It was just a really good moment, and it reminds me why we do all of this. And but now his dad is worried because it was a pretty big buck, and he thinks he set the expectations a little high for his future hunting. So I'm glad to be here, and It's fun to do a WAG check-in. Again, I miss all of you. And I would like to, if we could, put her on the spot a little bit. Can we hear a little bit about Caitlin's background, since we don't know that, or I don't, I'm sorry.
Sure. How about we check in with the other commissioners, and then Caitlin, that's your warning. If you could be ready to share a little bit of your background for us. Commissioner Baker, good morning. How are you today?
Hi, Rob. I'm good. Same with everybody else on the weather. It's cold and definitely fall here on the water. I just got back from, there seems to be a theme, a grandkid theme. My daughter and her family live in a remote part of Alaska, and I had not met my new grandson, so I summoned up all my courage and did all that COVID testing and all that. Got on an airplane, basically dressed in a hazmat suit, and went to Alaska for a couple of weeks, and just had I love going up there. So my son-in-law had a successful hunt as well while I was there, so I got to participate in some of the putting away of some really good meat, and now I'm back and looking forward to this meeting. I don't know about, we'll just see how it goes, but at least the participation will be listening really hard and answering any questions that anybody has.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Thorburn, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. And sort of mixed feelings about the season changes. I love fall. I'm not looking forward to the snow later this week, particularly. It seems a little early.
Understand.
Like Barbara, my participation will most likely be listening. I'm real interested to hear the work of the subcommittee. And I probably won't be around for the entire meeting. I'm sorry for not having my video on. My internet is terrible, and I find it works a little better if I leave the video off. So, I'll just to comment on Sammy and others, note that I was driving back from Lincoln County yesterday, passing all sorts of cattle trucks. So yeah, well aware of what's going on with the cattle on the move. So, good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Commissioner. To buy Caitlin a little more time, I'm supposed to check in too. Doing good, feel a little bit cooped up. I have a daughter that goes to Arizona State University, and she was cooped up too because it's online classes, but she's on the campus. And she actually took the time to reach out to us and call and say, hey, Mom and Dad, can I just come home for a week? Which was, whoa, okay. So we did all the COVID testing to be as safe as we could, had a great visit. I think she just felt cooped up and needed a change. But so she's back there, and we'll see how the year goes. But doing good, looking forward to the meeting. All right, Caitlin, how about a little bit about your background for those that we haven't introduced you to yet?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Caitlin Scarano. I grew up in Virginia, but I'm currently based in Anacortes, where I moved in March. I previously lived in Marble Mount, Washington for about 3 years. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Marble Mount, but it's a pretty rural, remote town right near the entrance to the North Cascades. I got interested in the state wolf policies, and I found the WAG and the opening when I was following the news of the Diabsid pack, which was like a local pack within a few miles of my home at the time. I work in marketing full-time for a small tech startup that's based in Chicago, and I've worked from home for several years since like 2017. My background is in creative writing though. I'm a poet and I have a book out and a second book coming out in 2022. I really identify as an environmentalist, and I feel like I was drawn to this position or this like taking part because I feel like it's a good way to participate like on a state or local level in policy. And I'm excited, especially like to take part like in this. And if
Hey,
there's anything else you want to know or want to connect with me, please reach out.
thank you, Caitlin.
Sure.
All right.
Rob, I have one other quick announcement, if I could jump in.
Please, Donnie.
So Don is in our attendees list, and I forwarded the phone number to Nikki to see if we can promote him. I don't know if we can with a phone number or not, but I just wanted to let folks know that.
All right. Nikki, just checking in with you if you saw that message yet and if it's something we can do.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. While we're giving Don a chance, I also wanted to let you know we got a couple of people in the background. Nikki, of course, I think you're familiar with Nikki. She's providing us the support, as well as Chris Miller. And so Chris, this is his first time helping support the Zoom meeting, and so we're grateful to have his help as well. And I think there's Don Dashiell. We just about finishing our check-ins, and your timing's pretty good. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm fine. It's fall. I'm hunting cows today, but I don't want them to come home for another 6 weeks.
Gotcha. All right, Don, good to have you. All right. So what I think the purpose of this meeting is, I want to check in and make sure I've got it right. Our group identified a subcommittee to work on proposed language for what was then called chronic conflict zones. And you'll hear that the group is going to propose a different name. And I think the main purpose here is for them to share their thinking, show you what they came up with. So that's one thing. Next, giving you, the members, a chance to ask questions, and you might have thought of recommendations. So this would be an opportunity for you to share that and those ideas, and for us to capture them, all towards, helping you judge, what do we make changes to the protocol with this topic? And if so, what are those changes? So I think that's the purpose of why we're here today. I just want to pause and give anyone an opportunity to correct me, or if they had different expectations, to let me know. And again, we're using the hand raising function. So if you have something to say, go ahead and raise your hand. I'm monitoring the participation list, and that'll be my cue to check in with you. Okay. So I think our initial plan is the subcommittee consisted of Lisa, Lynn, Sammy, Candace, and Julia. So about a month ago, they were able to send out their initial ideas about this topic. So I think we're going to start with giving them time to share what they're thinking, and then they'll open it up for questions at the end. And Lynn, were you the one that was going to kick off the group?
Nope, I am.
Okay, Sammy. All right, Sammy, anything else you need as far as a lead in, or are you ready to go?
I think we're good. I think, kind of, I guess, to follow your lead in just a little bit, the purpose that the reason we wanted this meeting was strictly to talk about Section 9. My power is blinking, so this may not be good.
Okay.
To continue our discussion on Section 9 and moving forward with it. I'm a person who likes to just get things done, and having things sit on the plate for several months at a time is I don't like it. So anyway, the goal is to keep moving forward, to share our thoughts, have received feedback, not necessarily craft any language in this meeting, just receive feedback, and then let us as a subcommittee revisit it and bring it back at the November meeting. So that's kind of what we as the subgroup wanted out of this. If my correct, subgroup? Like that's what our thoughts were. So how we started this, as you all know, you received a list of 3 scenarios. And the scenarios were different, all still, based around a chronic zone is what we were calling it at the time. And the goal was for us as individuals to give honest feedback on how they would handle those given scenarios. And that gave the subgroup an idea of, you know, how everybody would have handled them differently. And I think what it really came down to is we were searching for the commonalities. We were searching for what was common amongst our different backgrounds and our different thought processes. And we did find some of those. And I'm just gonna kind of read through. We've got 9 notes here that are pretty much our what we found in those, and they're on my other computer, so I'm gonna face my other computer for it. But the first one was simply follow the protocol, and that came up in lots of people's. It was very common for us to find that in all 3 of the different scenarios, was follow the protocol as it's written. The second one was implementations of case by case based on the actions of livestock producers. So that was, you know, people felt like there was differences in the scenarios of how livestock producers were handling what was happening, and that was also, you know, it came up in a lot of them. Follow what if the producer's doing the right things, let's help them out. If they're not, we need to help them work towards doing those. The third one, implementation, implement actions differently based on the land status, whether it's private versus public lands. The fourth one is implement range riding on public land regardless of the cooperation of the producer. I think that was kind of surprising for the subgroup to see that come up in as many people's comments as it did. Excuse me. The fifth is lethal control should not occur without adequate or reliable range riding. Sixth is reach out to the public for creative solutions and assistance and ideas. I guess try to, you know, the goal of that was try to figure out if there's something that we're missing. Is there something that just the general public has for thoughts, and maybe that would bring the public into our discussion about wolves in Washington a little bit more and make them feel heard. Seventh is reach out to members of the affected community to provide assistance and ideas to the livestock producer. So 6 and 7 are kind of similar there. Implement enhanced planning, cooperation, debriefing meetings, including land managers, livestock owners, WDFW, and others involved before and after each grazing season to plan for conflict mitigation. Number 9 is incorporate the ability to move livestock to alternate pastures if and when available and feasible. So those were kind of the common themes that we found in the responses from different scenarios that were sent out. I appreciate all the WAG members that did participate in that. I think that was really good for us as a starting point of where to go from and reach out to. So thank you for that. And I think that was all my part. Is that right, Lynn? Perfect.
Thank you, Sammy.
Would you be able to share screen the draft?
The draft language, Lynn? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
please. I know you're going to have it available to add suggestions at some point, but it'll help because I'm going to start reviewing some of that.
Okay, there you go. Can you all see that?
Yes, I could see it, Julia.
Excellent.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to start by discussing the name change for the section. We recognize the fact that there's been some concern on the producer side about the name chronic conflict zones, that, you know, it's perceived as more of a negative connotation and perhaps laying blame if a producer's allotments are deemed chronic conflict zones. So we decided to move to some more positive language and see how everyone feels about that. So our final idea was enhanced resource areas. We initially talked about enhanced protection zone or enhanced deterrent zone. And we settled on the enhanced resource areas title, but we're open to other suggestions. But we want it to reflect that these are high priority areas. And that's one of the reasons we have this section in the protocol. So just to go over the beginning part, we wanted to be as inclusive as we could in defining ERAs. So we listed various ways of defining them. And we wanted to be clear that even if a pack name changed, it was still considered the same area. So it could be a pasture, an allotment, a geographic pack territory where we've had all the non-lethal deterrents implemented, but depredation still occurred, and there'd been lethal removal for 2 or more consecutive years. And then, we included the rationale for including this section because there are some members and of WAG and of the public who do not think that this section is necessary, but we wanted to include some ideas of why we think it's important. So we want to focus on the fact that the goal is to minimize repeated loss of livestock and wolves. There's going to be significant hardship caused to multiple groups because of repeated depredations. Lethal removal of wolves in these areas is not having the intended effect of breaking the patterns of depredation and reducing losses. And I think that's something that we just really haven't focused on, the fact that lethal removal is not changing what's happening in these areas. And right now, the protocol doesn't address this conundrum. So we're hoping to come up with some solutions to this issue. So we want to give some guidance to the department when these situations occur and work towards ideas, possibilities that honor our shared goal of reducing livestock and wolf losses. And then we're going to turn it over to Lisa to just review these last 2 paragraphs if she's still on.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Lisa, how's your internet connection? Oh, that's not a good sign. Lisa, can you hear us okay?
I can go ahead and do it.
Okay, thank you, Lynn.
Okay, so we worked with some language that was already in the original draft, and we added a few things, changed some wording. Of course, this is considered a draft. We're looking for input and maybe some information, other details to flesh out this, this section. But I'm just going to read through it. In these areas, WDFW staff will work with the affected producers, landowners, and land management agencies to attempt to understand the cause of the conflict and to develop an implementation plan for additional or enhanced proactive non-lethal deterrence. And so this may include, having meetings at the beginning of the grazing season to help determine what can be done differently in these areas that have experienced chronic conflict. Okay, so the plan will seek creative alternatives to reduce or eliminate additional loss, attempt to break the need for repeated lethal removal. So we could be discussing non-lethal tools, changes in how they're deployed, or priority for funding. Discussions may include evaluation of local ungulate and predator abundance and management, with an effort to draw connections between the various management plans. And this would be something the department would have to, you know, weigh in on with all those plans. I think the idea is to put a lot of heads together to figure out what are the causes, what can we do differently? And I think differently and enhancing are two important words. So final paragraph, additional or enhanced non-lethal deterrents will be implemented prior to considering lethal removal in these areas. However, lethal removal could be considered if other livestock producers in the same wolf pack area are experiencing wolf depredations and they have deployed the appropriate deterrence measures for a sufficient amount of time prior to the depredations. So this is the total section that we've drafted, and we're looking for your input. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all in the subcommittee. So Lynn, since you were the last to speak, just wanted to check in. Is this where you'd like to open it up for feedback?
It's a good time.
Okay, great. All right, WAG members, anybody have any of their thoughts to share on this? So far, nobody's raising their hands. How about, let me just check in. Tom, initial thoughts on this?
The short answer would be yes. So I appreciate the name change, getting away from chronic, because that creates a chronic high blood pressure issue for me. So I appreciate that, the thoughtfulness. And I think, as I mentioned on our last call, that this conversation, at least at that time, I wasn't sure that it was going to be harder than I think some people thought for us to work through. And that hasn't changed. But I guess I would first say I really appreciate the work of the subcommittee in what they've done here. And they did it in a pretty short order. So that's greatly appreciated that they took the time to do that. I guess for the Farm Bureau, I'll just speak for the producers that I represent. Boy, I mean, this is a political minefield in some ways. This whole issue of lethal removal, and the elephant in the room is, you know, the latest letter from the governor did not help, at least for my membership. We just felt that elevated the political nature of wolf management. So this approach is troubling for us because it seems in the very areas where we have the most problem with depredations, we want to step back and, in a sense, go into a timeout and reassess and look for different tools at the same time that we're still experiencing high levels of depredation. And I know just by saying that elevates blood pressure on other folks on this group, who I greatly, you know, appreciate working with. And so, but I just want to be honest. I mean, that's the troubling factor for us. No surprise. Whereas, you know, there are other states that are using science to manage how they're managing wolves, and they're continuing to lethally remove wolves to reduce depredation levels. And it appears with this document that we would be going, well, adding this section into the protocol, that we would be going in a direction differently than what some of our other Western states are doing. And again, at the same time that our livestock producers are on a hair-thin profit margin of just staying, you know, economically viable. So, you know, all of that just makes me a little bit nervous of what this language is doing.
All right, thank you, Tom. Paula, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so thanks for your comments, Tom. And I really wanted to thank the subcommittee members for all your work, because I know that wasn't easy. And I actually think the document is on the right track. It's nice and concise. And I think it it gets at the core of the issue, and there's something there that I would want to elaborate on, and maybe it doesn't require new language, or maybe it does, but I wanted to respond to Tom really quickly. And I hear you, Tom. And I think it just can, I think the perspective that you articulated continues to highlight how differently that we're looking at this. And so the subcommittee was careful to put language in there that pointed out that that lethal removal wasn't changing the behavior, right? And that's what is one of the motivations here. So it's not just trying to pile on more non-lethals. It's not trying to go backwards. It's not trying to step back. It's just trying to say that, hey, if you're killing wolves every year and you're still having problems, then we're not getting at it. And what I'm more than just a little bit concerned about with how you phrased it is that it sounds like from you and or your members' perspective is it's like, well, let's just kill more of them. Let's keep killing them. There's not a problem to keep killing them. Let's kill more of them. And the reference to science-based management in other states, and I think that could we could have a discussion about that as well. And that paper that you shared with everybody, the DeCesar paper, was a 10-year study of the impact of hunting seasons on whether or not there was a decrease in livestock depredations. And so, they found that it didn't, right? They found that having a, population level management and hunting and essentially just increasing the total number of wolves killed in the state over a 10-year period was not the thing that decreased depredations. And it was a combination, they recommended adaptive management, a combination of continuing to use lethal where it worked, but also being adaptive and learning about the non-lethals. And I think that's where we're coming from. And, some of the experiences, especially that we've learned from places in Montana, and I'm not talking about landscape, I'm talking about social here, just the idea that there are places where ranchers in certain valleys were like, it's not helping to continue to kill wolves year after year. And in fact, they felt like it was destabilizing things because they couldn't get to know the packs. They couldn't figure out how to manage around them. And once they had packs that they knew, they could adjust their strategies, and they really didn't have issues. And they didn't like it when they were having to kill wolves every year and still have issues because it was still a lot of work for them and it was still a lot of uncertainty for them. So I think that's what we're trying to get at. And when I hear your comments, it does feel like there's still a disconnect about a disconnect about intent, and potentially B, a disconnect about just our understanding of either our understanding of science that's out there, and then third, maybe just a value issue. And I appreciate that you noted that you knew that what you said might cause our blood pressure to go up, and it does, because on our side, the social thing is people just don't like to see wolves killed year after year, especially when it's on public lands. Like, it's not fair. And so that's a big impetus, I think, for our community wanting to make sure that this language is in there. So thank you for giving me the time.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. And before I go to you, Candace, I see your hands up. Just want to welcome Diane. Diane, I see you were able to join us. Thank you. I'm not quite sure when you joined, but the subcommittee presented their draft language and their reasoning, and we're now soliciting feedback from members of the WAG. So great to see you. Anything to check in with the group on before we continue?
Nope, let's continue. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Diane. Candace.
Yeah, I think 2 items too, just to, because I had a feeling that this topic would come up, but I think there's 2 items that are really important here. And I think even when we're talking about any tool that we have in the toolbox, whether it be a non-lethal deterrent or the lethal option, the word, whether it works or whether it was a success or something like that, I think adds descriptors that they're not realistic. So I think it's important to point those out, because what quote unquote works for some, that may not be working for other people. So I think that's an important thing to point out. But then also, we did have a discussion around this topic of whether lethal worked or not. I think one of the things that we did discuss was the way that lethal had been implemented did not work, quote unquote work, or it didn't reach the level of what some people would say was successful. So I think that's an important distinction, that the way that lethal has been implemented hasn't had the desired effect.
Thank you, Candace. I don't have any hands right now, but I'd like to call on Bill, and Bill, just pick your brain a little bit. What are you thinking right now?
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts going on right now. I took Julia up on this webinar, and I don't know if anybody else watched it last Monday from Minnesota, talking about their problems with the wolves and the depredation. And it was did anybody else even watch that? Hopefully Julia did, but
I did, Bill.
okay. Well, I was very impressed because they have a lot more wolves than us, but I had a couple key notes I wanted to share. But just to cut a little background, they have 2,700 wolves and about 500 packs. And they said that they did try public hunting earlier, about 10 years ago, and it had minimal effect on the depredations. And then the wolves are now listed by feds as threatened again, so there's no hunting by the public. But they were talking a lot about the learned behavior of wolves, and when they go lethal, it has to be immediately following the verified depredation. They only do it within a half a mile of the depredation, and they only do it for 18 days. If it's a learned behavior, they want to try to get the wolf that is learning that behavior out of that pack and right away. And when they've done this, they remove about 180 wolves annually, but they said 75% of the areas had no wolf problems the following year. And I say, maybe that's one of the things we need to look at is, I noticed that, that when there's a kill order out now or a lethal removal order, it goes for a long period of time and sometimes there's no activity, but Minnesota is emphasizing it's got to be within 18 days and within a half a mile of where that depredation was. And then that's it. But they're targeting the ones that are learning the habits. And I think that's pretty important, that maybe, that's somewhere along this line, we need to take a look at something along those lines.
Thanks, Bill. And, that seems broader than, for example, I'm going to check in with you. I'm not sure if I've got this right, but it seems broader than just talking about chronic conflict zones. And that seems more like an overall policy consideration. But I didn't know, and I wanted to check with you, is this linked or should this influence the chronic or the enhanced resource areas we're talking about?
Well, I think it really does, because some of the perception of the lethal policies that we have right now, I can see where a lot of groups would be very upset that they're out. And, I don't really know what our wildlife people are doing when they're out there with the lethal order, how they're trapping or hunting or how much effort they're putting into it. But it just seems like that the public perception, if they know, okay, if we have a depredation and we're only going to go looking for, trying to get the wolf that was involved in that depredation within 18 days with this closer area, then it might be more socially acceptable for having lethal. And, in certain areas, it doesn't directly relate. Well, it is related to this, but it's not this page, but it's something that I really think we really need to think about.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. All right. I don't have any hands up. Subcommittee, I guess, let me share what I think I'm hearing so far and see if I've got that right. It sounds like members are still wrestling with, is this section necessary to be in the protocol or is it not? As opposed to specific recommendations on the language as it exists. So I want to check in. Is that what other people are hearing too? Are we still wrestling with that issue? All right. Well, Tom, when I heard you, what I think I heard is you and the people you represent are still having a real hard time with even this section in the protocol. Is that an accurate read?
Yes, and let me say, I was also having a hard time finding out how to raise my hand being. So thank you for calling on me. Stop laughing, Diane. You know what I mean. You know, I think that's it. And just like looking at the third, I guess, bullet point in this draft document, where it says the lethal removal of wolves in ERAs is not having the intended effect of breaking patterns of depredation and reducing losses. And based on Bill's comments, and which I agreed with, you know, we would think it should say the present application of lethal removal on wolves or on lethal removal of wolves. There's a lot more to this conversation, we believe, than just how narrow the focus is here. So is it that lethal hasn't worked, or has it not been applied appropriately, or has it not gone on long enough? Has it not been implemented fast enough? Lots of questions on management. These are complex issues. And this seems, from our perspective, that it boils it down, maybe simplifies it too much. So I think that gets at the heart of it for us.
So, because the issue's bigger than just this topic is what I'm hearing. This is a real narrow focus, but it's part of a bigger picture that's not reflected. Is that?
I think it's unresolved within our group here and within our communities that we represent on the value of lethal removal, of how it should be implemented in the field, how quickly it should be used, how often it should be used. Those are all, you know, there's not agreement amongst all of us on that aspect. And yet now we're trying to, with this document, I don't know, take one position and move that forward where all these other issues are yet to be resolved or agreed upon. So you're asking us to agree to the language on paper and in a sense, take a position on lethal removal that we don't agree with. At least, when I say we, I mean the Washington Farm Bureau.
Okay. No, thank you, Tom. Julia?
Dawn is wanting to speak, and then I also will keep my hand up because I want to point something out as well.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Julia. Don, go ahead. Don, if you're talking, we can't hear you. I don't even see him on my screen. Nikki, do you know if he's there?
Yeah, I'm looking for him.
I think he was a phone number on the participation list, but I don't see him.
Okay, I unmuted him.
All right, Don, are you there?
Don,
Still
I also
haven't-
resent you your link information too, so you can actually call in as a panelist instead of on the attendee list.
So Don, how about we give you time to connect, and I'll go to we got a couple people in the queue, and then we'll circle back with you to check in with you. Julia.
I know that this is an incredibly thorny issue for folks, and we in the subcommittee definitely struggled with wording, you know, and so want everybody here to appreciate that it is draft and it's meant to be changed and to evolve. To respond to Tom's comments, I just want to make sure that WAG doesn't forget some of the areas of commonality that I think are already agreed upon in the current protocol. So what Bill referenced about how Minnesota manages, that they're doing it within an 18-day period, that kind of thing. Remember that Washington's protocol, the one that you all created, does say that periods of lethal removal are generally 2 weeks, that they should be as swift as possible. That's what's in the protocol. So absolutely, Tom, I hear you. It's not always carried out that way. And so I think there's room to talk about what the application of lethal removal looks like, and can that language be adjusted for this section. But there, and I just put this out there for folks to think about and argue about, but I don't know if WAG is on different pages with how it should be carried out. The protocol as written says that it should generally be within a 2-week period, that it should be something as swift as possible, and that it shouldn't be dragged out, that kind of thing. So I wonder if that's already in the protocol and if that could be a point of commonality. And I think Don is still trying to speak too.
Yeah, I think I see his number up there now. Thank you, Julia. Don, can you hear us right now?
I've been hearing you all the time.
No, sorry, we haven't had luck the other way, but we can hear you now. Go ahead. Anything
All
you'd
right.
like-
So my response to the statement that lethal removal hasn't had the desired effect, I'll guarantee you after 24 confirmed depredations and probably a certain number of unknowns that are, being figured out now, that as soon as that wedge pack was removed, the cattle were back and acting like cows again almost immediately. So I'm guessing they're not, and that's been 10 or 12 years. Well, let's say 8 years since the former wedge pack was removed, and there was very little conflict during that time. So I suspect there'll be not any chronic conflict in the wedge again. So again, my comment is they just need to implement the protocol against the culprits a lot quicker, and you'll have less trauma on both sides. Because there's plenty of wolves, I'll guarantee you, they're still piled up here. That's it.
All right, thank you, Don. Dan, Paul?
Yeah, going back to Tom's comments, and I appreciate them. I think the challenge with changing the title of the section, which I agree, it's fine to have a more positive or collaborative spin on it. So I'm fine with enhanced resource areas, but it takes away from the reading that these are dealing with chronic zones that have had multiple years of lethal removals. So we're not really talking about lethal removal application in a single incident. It's year after year of this, which we're trying to get to. And so I know my community, at least my organization, we are strongly in favor of having language to address this. This is not condemning lethal used properly for the response for that year, but year after year, when it continues to happen, we need to have a different result, which is increasing our understanding of the pack and more effective ways than just trying to blast our way out of it. So yeah, and to Don's point, with the wedge, after that pattern was broken through lethal, you didn't see additional years of lethal because the pack was not there and reestablishing itself. So this is again dealing with year after year chronic problems. So I just want to caution, as we change the name, we can't forget this is we're dealing with specific chronic areas.
Thank you, Dan. Sammy?
Thanks. As I'm trying to take notes so we can take back to the subcommittee, I do want to slightly remind WAG members, help us find the notes, help us give us the notes to get us back to where the subcommittee can revisit this and go through it. That's kind of the idea of this. I wanted to kind of make sure we stayed focused towards that rather than just trying to rebuttal each of others' comments. With that said, the one thing that I did kind of make note here, because I think there is good thought to it, and how the lethal is implemented is something that I personally have been after the department for since they started. Is it takes so long to once the criteria is met, it's probably close to a week before the helicopter is launched to go lethal, and that time frame I think is something that can certainly be addressed, but it also can't be addressed without everybody on board. I don't think that's a department thing, and maybe it's more of commission and director thing than it is WAG, but I think that's one of the things that can be addressed. And one of Bill's comments that I did make note of, that maybe we need to write it on paper, that the speed needs to be sooner once the criteria is met, and maybe that would help with the way the implementation of lethal of working, the success rate. So that is one of the things that I made note of. And like I said, I let's just throw some thoughts at this, right? Like what's crossing your mind with the chronic areas, right? Like they're enhanced resource areas, but they, like Dan said, they are chronic. Help us see what we missed in this document. So, thanks.
Thank you, Sammy. Paula?
So thank you, Sammy, for reminding us not just to rebut each other and come up with useful feedback. And I am supportive of us looking at better implementation of the protocol that we have on the lethal side, and to see if, again, once the thresholds are crossed and once the assessment has been made that adequate non-lethals have been implemented, and so this is within 1 year, right? Then trying to figure out how to act more expeditiously. I mean, that could help within years. And sometimes I do think if you end up having a really bad year, that can contribute eventually to the creation of a chronic zone. So having that, I'm okay with having that be part of the discussion. I just don't want to lose sight of the both the non-lethal side, because I do think that there's a lot there. But in thinking about the profanity, OPT, kettle range things, I mean, we did have, like, so in 2016, which is a painful year for everybody, the vast majority of that pack got eliminated. And there were, it's hard to know whether the OPT pack was, if there were remnants from the prior pack or not that had that behavior. But, the department like directly killed 7 of the 12 pack members. And then there were additional wolves that were, that were known to not survive, or, and one was poached that year. So, I mean, that pack pretty much got decimated. And then there was a problem in 2017 with Sherman animals coming up, and we couldn't predict that, right? And so that's why it got a lot of us thinking that it might be there might be something to do with the landscape and the place, not necessarily just the animals. And so these are just examples of things to think about, right? And then one Sherman wolf was removed in 2017, and it stopped the depredations for the rest of the season. And then a new pack formed in 2018, and they started depredating again. And so that none of those issues to me stem from not doing lethal fast enough, because once lethal was done, I mean, lots of wolves were killed, like in 16, and then in 17, one wolf was killed pretty quickly, and at least it looked like the issue had stopped. And so there's these either unpredictable things, or there's additional variables that we just either don't understand yet that require everybody putting their heads together to try to analyze it. So I'm not saying this to be a rebuttal. I just think it's kind of a both and, that it's worth looking at making sure we're implementing what we have correctly, but we definitely have situations in which unpredictable things happen. And it's pretty extraordinary to do lethal removal 4 years in a row in one pack territory area. And so did we ever really do a big analysis of why we think that happened and all the factors that contributed to it, and what might we do different? I think that's the intent here. so I don't want to lose sight of that. And there is, there is good language that kind of gets at that in the draft. And so I wanted to note that and appreciate to everybody that we're kind of getting at it. But I think what's so hard for all of us and hard for all of our stakeholders is that these are like emergent problems. Like in 2017, you thought things got taken care of in 2016, and no doubt all the conflict specialists and wildlife biologists in DFW, did everything they could to, think about the issue at the time, and did everything they could to work with the producers involved. And things happened anyway, but you didn't know that beforehand. And so when you have something that happens 3 years in a row, then the idea, and I guess this is a question for all of the producers, I don't understand what's threatening about the idea of stating an intent that everyone that is involved in a situation that has become chronic, committing to like having, sitting down together, not fragmented, but sitting down together and pooling all of their knowledge of the situation with an intent to try to make it better the next year, right? It's not punitive to the rancher. It could be something as simple as there was a resource constraint. We only had 5 range riders to cover 300,000 acres, and that wasn't enough. And so we couldn't be everywhere all at once. It's not the rancher's fault. It's not the range rider's fault. It was a resource constraint. So can we put more resources there the next year? That's just an example. And so I would really, so this is either for all of us to discuss right now or for the subcommittee to think about, but I truly do not understand why it's so threatening to, after a season is over, have a commitment for everybody to get together to say, what can we learn that we didn't know after year 1 and we didn't know after year 2, but now we've got a 3rd year of a pattern. And maybe in retrospect, we can figure out what's going on here and try to make it better for everybody. And so to me, that's a really good thing. And I genuinely would like to understand why that feels oppressive or threatening or like it's a step back.
Thank you, Paula. Jessica?
Yeah, I guess after listening to Paula speak, I think I'm echoing some of the things she said. And I'm going back to what Sammy said or asked us, which is what are our impressions, rather than just refuting each other. And I think that the idea of focusing on non-lethal measures, I think it's worth exploring that more and whether those non-lethal measures are actually being implemented. And, I'm hesitant to bring up specifics, but I know that there have been some cases in the past where, it's uncertain whether range riders were actually doing what they were supposed to be doing when they were supposed to be doing it. And so in some ways, I don't wonder if rather than just jumping right into lethal and that discussion, but talking about, and maybe not in this document, but just in general, talking about ways that we can improve management in the ERAs by doing other things like improving range riding, whether that is, having different folks do it or having more folks do it or whatever. And I think I'm especially interested in talking about that just because of what Sammy said when she was going through the list of feedback from WAG members when they read the 3 different hypothetical scenarios. And one commonality was that there are people who feel like range riders should be required on public land, whether the producer is okay with that or not. So I guess I would be interested in talking more about that as well. I just see us getting really focused on lethal. And I think, like I said, exploring options and how we're implementing non-lethal measures, I think is also important.
Thank you, Jessica. Lisa, I see I think you're back, or I'm not sure, so I wanted to check in with you. How's your internet? All right, not a good sign. Okay, so no hands right now, but I'd like to ask well, now we have a hand. Diane?
Hi, I just wanted to echo, similar to Jessica, what I heard Paula say. And to me, having the discipline to sit down after a rough grazing season to really look at what the lessons learned are from it is a really important thing. And one way you can make that happen is by highlighting it in the protocol. I find it's an area that I'm challenged with in my daily work when we're so busy and have so many competing priorities that making yourself stop to evaluate and to look at those lessons learned is really hard to do. And it's really critical in moving forward and doing the best job that we can do. So I think it's really important that it's highlighted and kind of makes us, and I don't say us meaning that I would need to be at the table. I think that it's whoever's involved in a particular area that knows the details the way that I'm not going to know that. I think that's what will give rise to some really creative options that are the durable solutions that we're looking for by the increased intelligence we'd have from that.
Thank you, Diane. Tom?
So I think I've got I was just looking over the document one more time. The very last sentence, and again, if this is the right version, does it begin lethal removal may be considered? Is that the last sentence? Yeah, I'm seeing Lynn shake her head. I guess that highlights my concern. Lethal removal may be considered if other livestock producers in the same wolf pack area are experiencing wolf depredation. So it's restricting the use of lethal based on some new parameters. In a chronic area where producers are experiencing a high level of depredation. We just don't think that's a good management tool. And it's not a policy or an approach that we can wrap our arms around. We think lethal works. And again, the question is it being implemented appropriately, properly, timely enough right now? Now, another thing though that just popped in my head as we're having this conversation, and it's a hard one, is the very last meeting we had with Francine in Spokane, and we spent a day or so talking about the social media aspect of this, the social parameters, the concerns that the general population has about wolf management. And I'll be, honest and say, I get micro-focused and just thinking about, what our folks think about this and trying to maintain a climate where my farmers and ranchers can stay in business. So clearly, every time a wolf is lethally removed, there is a different impact across the state depending on what your view of wolf management is. So I just want to say I get that, and then back into my cave and say saying any restrictions on lethal removal, especially in those areas where we're having a lot of problems, is just hard for us to swallow. So is there another way to approach this? I guess I'm just asking, because I'm not at absolutely no, but I'm just saying, just think about it from our perspective. We're concerned about restricting the use of lethal in areas where we believe in some ways it should be used more, not less. But then also saying the overlay over the top of that is we also don't want to lose that tool because of the general public rising up and saying enough. So getting us complicated, but that's the angst that we're feeling.
Thank you, Tom. Jessica?
So I'm asking this as a genuine question because I don't have enough information. Paula, you had listed some circumstances in the last 5 years or so where you felt like they were clear examples of lethal removal not working. And then Tom, you're saying that you feel like it is effective. And I mean, I understand, I think Don mentioned, you wipe out the entire pack, and yes, absolutely, the cows are going to be happier than if there's wolves there. But lethal removal doesn't work like that, right? Like we don't just wipe out an entire pack all at once. It's incremental, as everybody knows. So I guess what I'm asking Tom, and again, this is a sincere question, is where, I guess I'm trying to reconcile, Paula's saying it's not always effective, Tom is saying yes it is, and I don't know enough to make the decision on my own. So I'm hoping somebody can help me. And I'm not trying to pit you two against each other. I'm just trying to gather enough to make my own decisions. So can you guys help me with that?
All right, thank you, Jessica. We, before anyone directly answers that, I think Caitlin would like to say something. Caitlin?
Yeah, I had two questions, and this is new for me, so if it's off base, like just let me know, sort of learning the process. But I guess I'm wondering, like, as we sort of go off like into more a broader discussion about the issues that the text that we're looking at today brings up, maybe it might be helpful for each time we have a critique, we tie it to something directly in the text, like this passage could be changed, or this is the specific thing I'd like to see in the text. Like, so make it like actionable, your critique. And then the other question I had was, I think there was language about, like, one of the categories was if there's like a chronic conflict in an area that one producer is experiencing, but not other producers in the area. And would that stipulation maybe not work in some cases if there are areas where a wolf pack just only interacts with one producer, so then you don't have that comparison in each area to look at? Does this question make sense? Okay.
All right, I see a couple of heads. Or thank you. Thank you, Caitlin. Anything else?
No, that's all.
Okay. So maybe as an example, let me offer to one of your first proposal where if members have an issue or concern tying it to a piece of the passage that the subcommittee put together. So I kind of heard an example of that when I heard Tom say that last sentence, of the proposed language, he had an issue with because he saw that as, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, as and maybe a restriction on using lethal as a tool, as opposed to keeping it as a tool. So that, in my mind, was a good example of what I think you were saying, Caitlin. And that also is an example, I think Paula had asked the question, hey, for those that identify with the producer community, what is threatening about proposed language here? And Tom, that was an example of that. So Caitlin, did I capture the idea right? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering, like, if we are talking about that, if we could have it on the screen so we can all see the passage that somebody's.
So before we do that, for this particular case, Julia, you had your hand up.
Sorry, I'm muted. I was just going to ask if you wanted me to share the screen and that we go through. I see Sammy. Sammy had said, please tell us what parts you cannot live with, or what part is exactly how you want it to read, because this subcommittee did some work to put together a product, and remember that a product is just a foundation from which all members can work from. It's intended to evolve and change with your discussion. And so, not that I really should give an opinion, but I agree with Caitlin. if you tie it to language, that may help move us along here. So I can share if that works for folks.
All right. Well, before you do that, we're scheduled to go till noon, no farther than that. We're about the midway point. So I'd like to take a 15-minute break. But think about that question. Let's go back to the language, and we'll throw that up on the screen when we get back. And let's ask for, hey, what parts you really can't live with, and and what changes you could live with. So let's think about that and come back after the break. Any objection? All right, so it's almost 10:25. We'll see you back here at 10:40. Thank you. All right, I think it's time to share the screen again. Okay, and just got word that Don Dashiell is having some internet connection problems, and he's going to try and call in.
Yeah, I have sent his, the call-in for him a couple times. Of course, it was via email, so I don't know how helpful that would be. If anybody has his like phone number, I could maybe text it to him.
Did you say Don or Dan, Rod?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said Don Dashiell.
Okay, and Dan also.
Oh, and Dan.
That's
Oh,
what the message was. I think you misread.
oh, I did misread. So it
Yeah,
wasn't
it's
Don
Dan.
Dashiell.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Don.
That's all right. It's Dan.
All right. So Dan Paul then. And Nikki, did you say you need his email or do you need his phone?
You probably
Whatever's
need
the,
cell
go
phone.
ahead, Paula.
No, I can text you, or I can message you privately his cell phone number if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you, Paula.
Yep.
All right. Julia, are you there?
Yes.
Ah, there you are. Okay. So I think let's take advantage of that last suggestion. We went on with the break. So Julia, could I ask you to throw up the proposed language? And let's give you a minute there so we can see it. And I see it. Also, wanted to point out what I think I heard in the first part. I think there was 2 places I heard some feedback already about the language. Where, Julia, if you go to the top there, we've heard, one of our members talk about the title. And, one of the ideas missing from that title is the idea we're talking about an area where there's a chronic problem. And so that's something for us to think about as far as renaming this section like that. As I repeat the things I think I heard, in the discussion, please feel free to correct me. And then in the bottom of the proposed language, we think we heard one of our members say that reference to lethal removal may be considered. It looks like you have it highlighted already. May come across as limiting that as a tool to be used.
Yep.
So I think those
Didn't capture that correctly, Tom, please let me know and I'll change it. And then I also captured this idea too. Or I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
This meaning on number 3, I wrote it was the present application of lethal removal.
All right, thank you. So now the question to members is, okay, where else in this document is there something that you just can't live with? Where else you have recommended changes, etc. And Bill, I see your hand is up.
Okay, if we could go back up to that first paragraph. The first sentence is real long and okay, but the second sentence within ERAs, a conflict maybe, I don't really understand that sentence. So could somebody on the committee help explain? Because I don't want, the word conflict is in there and I'm not sure I understand.
All right, let's give a chance for any member of the subcommittee to offer an answer.
When I was reviewing this document this morning, I did notice that word conflict too, Bill. So I'm not sure we want that in there. Open to suggestions of how to reword that.
Okay, so let's at least flag that as a word to clarify, Julia. All right, thank you.
Even with that, I'm not sure if you're just taking that conflict, I'm not sure that whole sentence even needs to be in there. I'm not sure what it means because we already defined the ERAs as areas and stuff. And
okay,
I'm not sure that sentence even needs to be there.
Maybe capture that, Julia.
Sorry, I can help. And subcommittee members, please correct me if I did not get this correctly, but it talks about a specific locale within a PAC territory because the first sentence says it's an area within a pack territory, or it's a geographic pack territory or an area within it. And so that's to recognize that, you know, the average pack territory in Washington is 300 square miles. So wolf pack may cover many different ranches, many different operations. And sometimes that does not, and typically does not affect all producers within that area. So it might be limited to a specific allotment, a specific pasture, a specific valley bottom, you know, whatever the case may be. It's to give that flexibility in defining what the area is.
And maybe we could say that ERAs may also be defined by specific locales within a pack territory. Because that's really just sort of adding that definition, because that first sentence is pretty long already.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Julia and Lynn. Paula, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, so I'm going to number 1 in that list, right below where you are. So the shared goal is to minimize the repeated loss of livestock and wolves. And so as you were summarizing what people were saying, and you know, Tom had expressed the concern that the intent here might be to limit the use of lethal. And I actually do think that's true. I mean, the intent here is to not use lethal control in the same place every year. So that is a limitation. And if we take that limitation out, then this whole section becomes kind of meaningless, right? The whole impetus is that there is so much social upset on both sides when you have a situation where wolves are depredating on livestock every year. So that's consternation on the producer side. There's consternation on the wolf advocate side and other members of the public who are paying attention, you know, and the stress on the department staff to have to kill wolves in the same spot every year. So the whole idea of Section 9 is to reduce the use of lethal control and not have to use it year after year after year. And, Jessica was asking the question about, why did Tom and I say different things? And, I think if we go back to one of our foundational science papers that everybody seemed to agree was a good basis, that Bradley et al. 2015, they had time periods, like when you do lethal, like how long is it before you get a repeated depredation? And if you were successful quickly with partial pack, or you did full pack removal, you had a longer period of time than 1 year. Sometimes it was several years. And that to me is like when lethal control is successful, is when you interrupt either a pack's behavior, or you change whatever's happening on the landscape, where new wolves coming in would still be prone to depredate on livestock. So if we're successful here, yes, we are going to be limiting the use of lethal. And I think we should all be very conscientious about that. I don't think it's saying that lethal is being taken off the table, or it won't be used when everybody agrees that it's necessary. And but the whole idea is for us to not use it as often. But the flip side of that is to also have not having wolves not depredate on cows as often, right? And so it's a shared, kind of a shared risk strategy here, where we're trying to reduce the impact and the risk on everybody. So I'm just calling attention to that sentence, because I always want to make sure we all understand that at least that's the intent of the section. And if that first sentence is not shared by everybody, then we're not going to come to agreement, and we're going to have a problem. I don't want to change. I just want to make sure everybody understands that the intent is to reduce the use of lethal control.
All right. No, thank you, Paula, for throwing that out and clarifying that. All right. I don't have any hands up right now, but Dave Duncan, we haven't heard from you yet today, so I wanted to check in with you. You have any thoughts on this? Dave, we can't hear you if you're speaking. Nikki, are you able to
How do
see?
you hear me?
Hey, we do, Dave. Now we hear you.
Yeah, I've been just doing a lot of listening. I think the committee worked hard at this. It's a real tough subject. I don't know if there's any real answers to it. I think we're really trying to micromanage the problem without knowing the cause. Because the whole's greater than the sum of its parts, and there's different areas of concern. Possibly you're going to have different causes. I'm really in favor of what Paula talked about, which I think Section 9 should be about, is just livestock producers and the department and the range riders and everybody getting together. Trying to define lessons learned, trying to do a better job in these areas, and still stay within the wolf plan and the protocol. And this, I'm really opposed to this document setting any policy. And I think this document, as it's written, kind of sets policy without defining cause and effect. I think that's what we're doing right now. And I'm also opposed to it setting policy that puts more responsibility on the livestock producers. I think we want to keep them in cooperation with the department, but overall it's the department's responsibility to manage all predators and all wildlife. And this whole section has troubled me from the beginning. I'm not saying I have the answers. I liked what was said as far as what this should be about. It's just getting people to work together, whether they do it once a year, 3 times a year, trying to define the cause, trying to have a goal of, I like the goal of killing less wolves and having less cattle depredated on. But I think this whole thing is wrong-minded the way it's written. So you asked.
All right. Thanks, Dave. And when I hear the ideas you just shared with us, I look at the paragraph underneath the numbered list. And when I read that, it appears it's when I read it, it sounds like the idea is, getting people together to learn the cause and analyze the cause before determining appropriate actions. And I think that's one of the things I remember in our meetings. It's you're regularly coaching us to make sure we try and learn the cause first. So I think that's getting at the idea. Do you have any recommended word changes? And if not now, it would be helpful if you have recommendations in the near future.
No, I'm just going to sit here and listen. I don't, there's a lot of pushback on my side on this Section 9. And I'm not going to stick my neck out too far. But we can't be setting any policy here in Section 9 if it's going to fly.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Sammy?
Can I ask Paula for clarification? She made the comment, if we're not all in agreement that the first sentence limits lethal. What first sentence are you reading that limits lethal?
The sheer goal is to minimize repeated loss of livestock and wolves.
That does not read limit lethal.
Well, the intent is to reduce its use, I guess. So it's not an a priori.
For less to die. Maybe the use is to use it better. Right? Like I concerned that you read that as to limit lethal. Because that is not the intent of that language.
Okay.
The intent is for less wolves and less livestock to die, period.
So repeated loss, right?
Right.
Okay, so is what you're saying is that if you got to problem wolves faster, that you think overall fewer wolves would have to die, and so from your perspective, if you had to do that, if you had to kill a wolf or two in a pack every year, that meets the intent of that first statement from your perspective?
Sure. I mean, to to say that limits lethal, I don't read that into it. It was not the intent. And if that is what everybody else is reading into it, sure needs changed, because that's not what the intent is. And it's really hard to hear you say that we have to 100% limit or eliminate lethal if there's been lost 2 years in a row, when there's no other tool in the toolbox. Like, to take away the most effective tool, and to hear you say that we have to take away the most effective tool, that doesn't work.
So I think maybe you're I think there's some misunderstanding going on.
That's why I asked for clarification here.
Okay. So so I think our community, and I want Diane to pipe up here, and I don't know if Dan was able to get back on the phone, but we might let me back up and just say, the problem from our perspective is having to kill wolves in the same place every year. And so the shared goal of minimizing repeated loss of livestock and wolves, the wolf part of it is to not have to use lethal control in the same area on an annual basis.
Correct.
So that's my goal, right? It's not, so I'm not saying that.
My goal is to have less cattle die in the same area every year too. So
exactly. Right. So that's a shared goal. And so what I wasn't saying that as a matter of policy in a chronic conflict zone, thou shalt not use lethal control, in the third year. It's the entire goal of the section is to try to get at a place where you don't have to, right? And so when Tom was saying he was worried about this language limiting it, I just wanted us all to be clear, is that at least from the wolf advocates perspective, we want to not see it happen every year. And so if the sum result or the end result of people being able to get together and diagnose the problem, and and whatever that diagnosis is, have a different approach to how wolves and cows are interacting, or sheep, in a particular place in a particular year, whether it's how the non-lethals are being implemented, or whether it's grazing patterns, or it might be how, retrospectively, how lethal is being employed, if we can learn that. But the entire goal is, from my perspective, and I want my colleagues to jump in, is to not have to use the tool of lethal every single year, because from our perspective, if you are, it means it's not being effective. It's not interrupting. You're still having depredations. So you're killing wolves and you're still having depredations.
So everything you just said right there is my community's whole intention as to why this whole section, and I've jumped on board and helped write the section, but as the committee will confirm, I was not on board with it, because I don't think that we need this section. I think we need to do all these things before there's a chronic problem. I think we need to do better at all the non-lethals that we already have in the toolbox, we already have in the protocol, before we have this problem. And then if this problem occurs, what are we going to do differently? And not a single person can give us what can do differently. And I gave all the WAG the opportunity to come up with something that we're going to do differently. as individuals when I had the scenarios, or we had the scenarios, and there is no magic tool. This is going to happen. We're going to have predators. We're going to have conflict. We've got to have a solution, and there isn't a magic solution. So
I'm going to stop because I know a lot of other people want to talk. But
Yeah.
I do think there's different things that can be done. And so that's just the whole intent. So I will.
Okay.
All
right.
But thank you for asking to share, Sammy.
Yeah, thank you, Sammy, and thank you, Paula. Now, I see there's a list in a particular order. Diane, I saw your hand up earlier and then it went down and I see it back up. Would you like to go now?
I could. I usually take it down if someone has said exactly what I was going to say. But,
okay.
But I will say that I agree with Paula that to me, the idea in looking at this and putting an emphasis on this is not so much to come up with, much like what Dave was saying, not to be prescriptive right now and to come up with solutions, but the intent to be that the folks that are most intimately involved and know the landscape, know how the pack is using the landscape, know the livestock producers' practices, that all of them come together and that we make that a matter of practice to see what the lessons learned are going forward. Because we know that the conflict creates such a social drain on everyone involved and certainly not something the ranchers want to see continue happening. But we also know with wolves that you typically can't shoot your way out of a problem with wolves. And I think that in bringing the minds together that really know the nuance of all that's involved on the ground, giving flexibility to department staff to work with those ranchers, but to make it intentional that kind of evaluation needs to happen so that we are able to come closer to meeting number one in this document.
Thank you, Diane. Julia?
Give me 1 second. I don't
Sure.
know how to. There we go. It's hard to do that while I'm sharing my screen. Something that Sammy said. She's saying, we don't know what the solutions are, no one's been able to answer what the extra tools are. I want to sort of take us back, the subcommittee back to why we wanted to call it enhanced resource areas rather than chronic conflict zones. And I hope a conflict specialist, like I know Joey and Candace are here, will help me out. But we don't start every single grazing season with every single non-lethal tool out there deployed, ready to go. That's not how it works. Non-lethal tools are deployed based on an operation, based on the level of risk, based on what that operation is currently doing. So we wouldn't, let's say, start a grazing season with fladry deployed if we had no indication that a wolf pack was around or likely to cause conflict or had a history. Proactive non-lethal tools are deployed strategically. Also, as you all know, wolves adapt to these tools. And so they're not all just out there and deployed, before the season even starts, because our resources are limited, our personnel are limited, our contracted range riders are limited, all of these things are. And so an idea of an enhanced resource area is, perhaps there are creative tools that we haven't used, and there certainly are, but all the tried and true things, we might not have those all out for every single livestock producer operating on the landscape because we simply cannot do so. And 85% of the wolf packs are not involved in conflict to start with. So these are localized issues. And so an enhanced resource area is, you're thinking, okay, there's an area where we've had conflict 2 years in a row that resulted in X number of depredations, resulting in X number of wolves being removed by an agency. Enhanced resources means that, hey, in this situation, maybe we are starting the grazing season with everything out on the table. You've got the contracted range riders deployed. Maybe you do have your flattery out. Maybe you've got your fox lights ready to go. Maybe there's some rag boxes there. Maybe, you know, there's a different level of communication with the Forest Service, department staff, that kind of thing. Those aren't wildly outside the box solutions, but our resources do need to be deployed strategically. And that's the whole idea of, we can predict that there might be more conflict and more loss of livestock and wolves based on our history of what has happened the previous couple of years. And so that's the idea, not necessarily anything wild and out of the box. And if Joey, Candace, if I got any of that wrong, or you want to help folks understand that picture a little bit better, I think it might help understand why we say it's an enhanced resource area. And that's what we're asking folks to look at.
All right, so before I go to the hand list, Candace or Joey, did you want to help Julia out or add anything before we?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other part too, you know, that's important, at least as important for me as field staff is if we're calling out an area like this enhanced resource area, this is also an acknowledgement that there's a big interest externally to these specific areas for whatever reason. You know, we already do all of these things anywhere, regardless of whatever the situation was the year before or not. We do try to have some sort of like, hey, what seemed to work last year? What didn't seem to work? You know, those types of conversations. But I agree with Julia, like in every location, because of all the reasons why Julia listed, you know, resource, staff time, range riders, whether it's our range riders or the coordination with, you know, the nonprofits that are providing those services as well. You know, we do try to put our heads together at the beginning of the year of what that looks like. But I feel like this is, some of the things that are listed here is not things that are brand new to what we're doing in the field. It's just an acknowledgement that these areas are of interest. We should focus resources, whether that's personnel, whether that's the financial piece. Hey, we've tried all these things in these areas. Is this an opportunity to try out, you know, pilot projects or things like that? So bring more focus to this area. But I know for me, like being able to identify these areas, I think is a collaboration of where is the external interest in these areas. And then that also helps because funding will be an issue moving forward. You know, how do we prioritize those areas? And it's not just WDFW, it's also the nonprofits that are participating in this as well.
Thank you, Candace. Tom?
So I think this conversation, thank you for the chance to talk again. This has been helpful. I think it's helping to clarify our kind of where the different sides are coming from. And so from what I've heard, and I thought, especially appreciated Paula's comments because I thought they helped to further clarify this conversation. And so I just wrote down a couple of summary points. And then Julia also helped in my thinking on this. So let's start out with, I'll just define it like this. So we're talking about 15% of the packs based on Julia's reminder that 85% of the wolf packs in the state aren't depredating. And the department has also told us that removal of depredating wolves will not have a long-term impact on the recovery of wolves in Washington. So we're not talking about an impact on long-term recovery here when we lethally remove wolves. And then Paula said, having to remove wolves each year reveals lethal isn't working. Now, I don't believe that's true. And maybe I'm oversimplifying what my friend Paula said. But I think there are some people who feel that way. From our perspective, we don't believe that is true. We believe lethal is a tool that is there to be used when it's necessary to be used, but no more than necessary. But to say that if you have to use it every year, that means it's not working, means that we think we can control the actions of and behavior of wolves year to year, and we simply can't. Obviously, we can't do that. So, to me, this really comes down to, in many ways, it's optics. It's representing the beliefs and opinions of the different individuals, different groups in the state that we each represent. And when it comes down to lethal, my people are many of the folks that I represent are going to have a different opinion of that than the folks that Dan, Paula, and Diane and others represent, clearly. So I think I'm acknowledging that fully. That doesn't mean, so I guess, so I would just take that to say, so that doesn't mean that lethal isn't working. It just means people respond to its use differently. And that may be more critical to this conversation than an ongoing conversation about whether lethal works or not, because it's being used in Montana, it's being used in Idaho, and I'm assuming the people that are implementing it there are saying the science defends their actions. So either they're using different science than we are, or we're approaching this differently than just talking about the scientific use and effectiveness of lethal control. And clearly we have a different population here in Washington than those other two states do. Just politically, we're left of center here. And so that has an impact on how the public sees management of wildlife, especially one as popular as wolves are. So I think that's important to acknowledge. At least it helped clarify in my own mind this conversation as we're moving it forward. So maybe I'll just leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Tom. Lisa, you're connected. I hope you're connected. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can finally hear you, and I hope my internet connection lasts for any length of time. I do apologize for that. I have caught about the last, well, since we came back from break, I pretty much have that. And I wanted to say, as a member of the subcommittee, I never believed when we did this, and I agree with Sammy, I didn't feel that we were taking lethal off the table. I think Julia explained things pretty well. I looked at it as, based on the social significance of wolves in Washington state and the governor's letter, I really felt that when it came to, whether you want to call it chronic conflict, enhanced resource areas, that we really needed to look at other alternatives because we didn't really have a choice. So I think the section that we wrote, the paragraph that was written below number 5, that first paragraph was pretty self-explanatory, at least to us by the time we got done with it, as far as we all recognize that something different needs to be done, because the public was saying and the governor were saying we have to do something different, not taking lethal removal off the table, but seeing if we couldn't creatively think outside the box to come up with some other ideas. Not saying that it wouldn't be the first or the last thing that we use, but just something so we could show the public, look, we've met after the season, we met before the season with everybody, and we tried to come up with these creative ways, knowing that there were repeated losses of both livestock and wolves in these areas and how we would deal with it. So that's just kind of what I wanted to say on that. I think Candance and Julia covered the rest of what I was going to say. That's it.
No, thank you, Lisa. And I'm glad we've got you connected again. Diane?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond a bit to Tom's comments related to other states and lethal. So from the beginning, I have supported lethal as a tool in management of wolves where needed. And it's that where needed that's the key. And I think as you look at some of these states that are really killing wolves at a very high percentage, we're also finding that it's not having the results they would hope for as far as lower depredations. They're still having issues with that. You know, I think we have to acknowledge that wolves are different biologically, ecologically than some other carnivores, and may need to take a bit of a different approach. But I, for one, am not saying that we're taking lethal off the table. It's that at its core, we're trying to prevent depredation so we don't have livestock loss that ends up resulting in the loss of wolves.
Thank you, Diane. Steve.
Thanks, Rob. I'm going to leave the camera off for connectivity issues, just in case. I've been getting some warnings here. So a couple of thoughts and then a question. So following up on Lynn's introductory overview as a subcommittee member, and specifically looking at the paragraph below the numbered list, I thought Lynn did a nice job of characterizing the intent of that paragraph with an emphasis on the additional tools or enhanced tools. And so, and then following up on Lisa's comments just now, I'm wondering if, and we've heard repeatedly, the recognition that lethal management is a part of wolf management. And so I'm not there. I don't think we're arguing about whether lethal management in the appropriate cases should be used. We've heard repeatedly appropriate cases. So the question then is, in enhanced resource areas where the post-season and pre-season discussions are happening, where there are a suite of additional or enhanced tools that can be brought to bear based on post-planning and pre-planning prior to the start of the season. I guess the question then becomes, with resources brought to bear and additional or enhanced non-lethal deterrence utilized, and depredations that occur in an enhanced resource area on that subsequent season, would lethal, under this scenario, given the language in this section, would lethal removal be appropriate at that time? So that's the question for the group to discuss. And then I want to come back to the portion of the paragraph below the numbered section that talks about the evaluation of local ungulate and predator abundance and an effort to draw connections. And I'd like to ask a subcommittee member what you envision sort of as an actionable item from the department's perspective. What is that really saying is going to happen from an on the ground perspective? And what is the expectation of the department? So that we at least, I need clarification on what that would be asking.
All right, thank you, Steve. So you had two questions there, but I think how about we pause for that last question? If a member of the subcommittee could take a shot at answering Steve's question about the wording.
Well, I was going to suggest, Rob, maybe the order of the two would be better. Let's stay on, let's stay on task, sort of more on the immediate question, which was, this section to me seems to be focused on the minimization of loss of wolves, minimization of loss of livestock through the use of additional or enhanced tools. And the question to the group then becomes, is this section saying that enhanced resource areas where additional resources or enhanced non-lethals are utilized and depredations continue, is lethal removal an appropriate action at that point? And then we can come back to the second one. Sorry, I think if we stay on the first.
All right, that's okay. Yeah. That's okay, Steve. All right, any reaction from members on Steve's question? I don't see any hands, which Steve, I'm guessing means they're thinking about it and processing it.
I mean, to me, that seems to be the heart of that is the heart of the question here, served up within the section the way this is put together. And again, nice job by the subcommittee.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Hey, Julia, just a heads up, my internet connection's getting a warning that it's unstable. So if I cut out, could you pick up the slack for me, please?
Yes, no problem.
All right. Sammy, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, it's just a response to Steve's is the intention of the subcommittee, and at least my understanding was never to take lethal off the table. The part of the idea in the rename was we take all the tools that we have, which we know what they are at this point, where there hasn't been a new and improved tool, but we take all of the tools that we have and throw them at these specific areas and really concentrate on, hence the enhanced resource. Concentrate the tools that we have, all of the non-lethals before the lethal becomes that third year in a row thing. So that was the idea, goal, I guess, but never was it to take lethal completely off the table.
Thank you, Sammy. Lynn?
I agree with Sammy. And I think what we haven't mentioned yet today is the issue of working with producers who may not be on board with enhancing their lethals or non-lethals, excuse me. And so I'm not sure how we're dealing with that specifically in this section, but I think that that's part of what this is about, is we do need to do everything possible and add an extra layer of protection in certain areas. And I think that's part of why in the last paragraph, we added the sentence, additional or enhanced non-lethal deterrents will be implemented prior to considering lethal removal. So that's what's different here. And for producers who don't want to get on board with that, I'm not sure how we're dealing with that.
Thank you, Lynn. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn, for that. And I just wanted to share that as I read through this, I never, I didn't have a perception that lethal was off the table. So it's exactly as Sammy and Lynn are describing. And so I think, yeah, the big change here, as Lynn just mentioned, is expectations that there will be meetings with the department to brainstorm better, more effective ideas, and then implementation before lethal is considered, but not off the table.
Thank you, Dan. Julia?
Subcommittee members, correct me if you had a different understanding, but one of the common values that came out when we sent out those scenarios for WAG members to look at was the issue that Lynn mentioned. She mentioned that what if, we are working so hard, we meaning the community, the department, everybody's working to try to prevent these situations from repeating themselves, and we can't get folks to come to the table, then we carry things out differently. That was a common value that a lot of folks came up with after reading through those scenarios. And so that was one of the commonalities that the subcommittee tried to capture in this language. And if folks disagree with my representation of that, please speak up, but that was my understanding of it.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, so no further comments generated by your first question, Steve. Would you like to ask your second question?
Hey, Rob, I wasn't sure if Dave was raising his hand.
Okay, let me check with Dave. Dave, did you want to say something? Dave, if you're speaking, we don't hear you.
Maybe I'm a little out of order here.
That's okay. We can hear you now.
I think we're placing an awful lot of emphasis on trying to resolve the issue of wolves that are hardwired into, or already hardwired into depredating on cattle in this whole section, and that concerns me. I think where we need to work harder is to make sure they don't become hardwired. And one example that I might have right now is we have a pack of wolves out of Dayton that I've seen the pictures of for 2 years, a year and a half. They're not even listed as a pack. The owner has a large cattle operation. They were down a bunch of calves last year. The pregnancy rate's down. The department hasn't even been out there, and they're getting close to becoming hardwired and be a problem. And we should have worked on that first. I think we're just placing too much emphasis on trying to resolve the issue of these hardwired wolves, which I don't think anybody knows how to stop them once they've started. I'm a little out of order by saying that, but I gotta throw it in there.
All right, Dave. Thank you. All right, so I have no hands right now. Steve, could you repeat your second question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So, and then I would also ask maybe if Joey has any input on the Southeast PAC that Dave was just mentioning, but
okay.
So relative to the last sentence of the paragraph immediately following the numbered 1 through 5 section, the discussions may include an evaluation of local ungulate and predator abundance and management with an effort to draw connections between various management plans. I don't have any idea what it is that the expectation might be of the department outside of discussing something. And so I need help figuring out from the subcommittee's perspective, what is the intent there for the department to do, or to, what's the actionable item that would come from the sentence?
All right, thank you, Steve. Would any subcommittee member like to try and answer that? Go ahead, Lisa.
If I remember right, the reason to put that in there was we were again looking at other things and that could be causing those repeated conflicts or repeated depredations on livestock. And so we were looking at, okay, has it been, we weren't sure whether anybody had been looking at what maybe the deer or elk herds were doing in that area, if they were in there at a specific time or calving in there in a specific time, was that having any effect? So it was basically the thing we could, so we'd have all the knowledge we could about that specific location where the deer. So, I mean, for example, in the springtime where there are a huge number of elk or deer in there that were having babies, and was that also drawing the wolves in or what? It was just kind of an effort to include maybe more department staff to explain the rationale, if there was any way of explaining it, for livestock wolf depredation issues.
Thank you, Lisa. Steve, did that help at all?
Yes. I mean, from the standpoint of what's the potential that there might be some ungulate or other predator interactions that might explain why an area is an enhanced resource area. So from Lisa's perspective, it was sort of in the context of providing some additional information on what might be causing it, not necessarily that there's an action item here of, the department, the department needs to figure out how to get more ungulates, or the department needs to reduce other predator numbers, or anyway, that helped from what Lisa provided, at least is what the subcommittee might have been thinking here.
Thanks, Steve. And Julia, maybe could you mark that sentence as possibly needing, clarification of the intent, please? All right, Sammy?
I think the part that was missed there was, having an understanding of the ungulate population and other predator population will give you an understanding of what is happening on the ground. And obviously that's the full intent of the predator prey study that is ongoing. My opinion is it's too late, but having that understanding is part of the discussion. When wolves are hungry, wolves are going to eat. When bears are hungry, bears are going to eat. When cougars are hungry, they're going to eat. That's just one of, that's human nature, animal nature, whether it's human or predator, or just even deer and elk. So having that understanding of what is happening gives a better understanding of how, what tools can be implemented and deployed. Maybe it does say, maybe that is implying, like Steve's indicated, reducing other predator populations if you're not, if there's not enough for the wolves to eat. So, all predators are going to eat, all ungulates are going to eat, all cows are going to eat, all humans are going to eat. It's just what we do. So having that understanding is a big part of any predator management.
Thank you, Sammy. All right, while we're waiting for any other comment, I just wanted to check in and acknowledge Dave had a question about a particular local or wolf interaction. Steve, you had asked, you didn't know if Joey had any particular information at this time. And Joey, I know it's put on the spot. I don't know if you have a quick answer or if it's better to circle back with Dave at a different time.
Yeah, no, so I would like to answer that. So we do have, so we are working with a producer. I have a new conflict specialist in the Blue Mountains as of June. And so this producer reached out to the department south of Dayton. And I talked to Sammy this morning. I told her the wrong pack. It's actually in the Tushy pack. And he's been working with this producer, been out there multiple times, worked with him on some watering sites, in relation to the rendezvous site that was early, some fox lights around some salting areas. So also got him signed up in a data sharing agreement. So now he's able to, him and his staff are able to, see that, live out there, from our data sharing program. So we've been working with that producer. If there's another producer that we're not working with, we have not heard about it. But I know this producer, did have some losses last year, calves that never made it back in. We had one investigation out there that was an unknown. It was about 7 to 10 days old and just not enough evidence at the scene to say, actually what killed it. So it was an unknown. But yeah, Dave, if there's someone else, please let me know. But I think this is the same producer, but we've been working with this producer for the past several months.
Thank you, Joey.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. And I just wanted to make sure that to me, a lot of good information there, but the fact that this is a confirmed pack that we have on the map, I think was another point that Dave was concerned about. So.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Dave. All right, any other comments or recommendations on the wording in front of us right now? Okay, so right now, no takers there. wanted to check in with the subcommittee members. From your perspective, is there any piece of this that you'd specifically like to call out for reaction or not?
Sorry, I would, Rob. I'm
All right,
sorry.
Julie.
Well, it's hard for me to share the screen you all at the same time. I think that it does seem like folks are still having a hard time, with this section and why we have it and all that kind of stuff. These 5 bullets that are in front of you were put there to lay out a premise that all WAG members can agree on. And you don't have to agree with your whole heart, but can you live with it? Does it make sense to you as a premise for why this section should be in the protocol? And I heard the word policy thrown around. Remember that the protocol is guidance that you all provide to the director. It's not a policy. So it remains that guidance. So the whole idea of these 5 bullets is for us to have a shared foundation from which we can build this section. If those 5 bullets don't make sense to you all, you don't agree with them, they aren't your shared premise, then I don't think we get anywhere on this section. And so that's where I would start, is make sure those 5 bullets are actually our shared goal, actually our premises that you can agree on. If they're not, what language changes would help get us to that space? Because all the subcommittee tried to do was provide this shared framework from which we could build this section.
Thank you, Julia. So how about I just give a moment here to see if there's any reaction to those 5 listed items. Is there any one of them that anybody's having particular difficulty with at this time? So I'm going to pause a second. All right, and this isn't your only chance as you think about it, but I think one of the main points of Julia was that these are important to the subcommittee. And Diane, I see your hand is up.
Well, I guess, we took conflict out of the paragraph above the 5 points. And Julia might have mentioned this earlier, but this is about conflict. And I wondered if there's a way that we could insert that somewhere in one of the bullet points below.
All right, thank you, Diane. You see Julia is looking for the right. All right, so while she's doing that, I don't see any other hands up at this time. So, just talking next steps a little bit here. So thank you all for participating and sharing your input so far. We have captured some ideas. I'm going to soon be doing intakes for our November 19th and 20th WAG meeting, so it's only about a month away. This will be part of our discussions in that intakes. How do we best, include and move this topic forward? Really appreciate the work all of you in the subcommittee taking the work from the past year plus into consideration, and then all of your continued effort on it. Before I close the subject, is there any other comment on it before we try wrapping up the meeting? Joey?
Yeah, I guess number 5. So the intent of the section is to provide guidance. I guess I'm just not seeing the guidance in here. Julia, if you would scroll down a little bit, please. Yeah, so this last paragraph here, additional or enhanced non-lethal deterrence. So we have in our toolbox, on a lot of these is delayed turnout or larger calves or range riders. And so I guess my question is the guidance for we're going to put more range riders out there, and what is the enhanced non-lethals? So I guess I'm just not seeing what the guidance actually is right now.
Oh, thanks, Thanks. Thank you, Joey. Got a couple hands in reaction to that. Paula?
I don't know, let Diane go first, because she's been following me, and I want her to have a chance to say her piece first. And if she's already said it, then I don't need to say anything.
All right, thank you, Paula. Diane?
I'm just not as quick with the finger there, Paula, as you are. So Joey, I guess my gut response to that question is that we don't know what that looks like, because the idea is that we've got people coming together to actually look at what do we think is really going on here? What have we tried? How effective has that been? What's the real issue? Do we not have a tool that can help solve that issue? Is there someplace else we can look to see if there's research happening in that area? Or, I mean, the whole idea is that we're problem solving together. It's that whole evaluation piece. So I know that it must be really frustrating for department staff, because it goes away from being able to easily check those boxes that that people want to see, and the department's under a lot of pressure for that. But I don't think you can answer that without first doing that evaluation period.
Thank you, Diane. Paula?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So I agree with what Diane said. And then I keep coming back to this point, and Dave liked this point, and so maybe we need some language to capture it, is that these, we never want chronic conflict zones to emerge, but sometimes they do. And when they do, it means that just collectively there hasn't been a good enough understanding of the situation, or gaps in things that have been tried, right? So the guidance to the department is to participate in a discussion, and potentially in a type of discussion that hasn't happened yet. And so you guys tell me, you department staff, tell me if you guys have actually done it, and if I'm wrong, that's great. But to have in the same room at the same time the producers, the range riders, the conflict specialists, the Forest Service range manager, if it's on Forest Service land, or whoever the land manager is involved, and have a special structured session that's designed not to point any fingers and not to blame, but just for everybody to contribute what they know and what they've seen, what they learned from year 1 to year 2, what they learned from year 2 to year 3, and try to get a sense of, okay, these are the things we tried. This is what we noticed about the wolf behavior. This is what we noticed about the cow or sheep behavior. This is what we know about the landscape. This is what we know about the local ungulate population. And given all of that, what haven't we tried, or what have we tried that we could do differently, right? That's the kind of, I mean, that's really all this boils down to. It is to, I'm sorry I sound like a broken record, but if a chronic conflict area emerges, it does mean that things that have tried before haven't worked. And so they're before just accepting that you have to kill wolves in the same place every year and thinking that that's an okay use of resources, thinking that society is going to be okay with that, thinking that your conservation WAG members are going to be able to, sit through that and retain legitimacy year after year. Instead of just accepting that, it's the whole idea behind this section is to gather people together and attempt to problem solve and see things that hadn't been seen before. And like Diane said very eloquently, we don't know what you're not going to see. So we're not telling you you have to put more range riders out on the ground, or you have to use range riders at the appropriate time of day, or you have to, change the grazing pattern, or you have to do fox lights where you didn't do them before. None of us are going to know that because we don't know what the emergent patterns are going to be when everybody is able to put their heads together and try to solve the problem. So that's why we can't be specific. And I think that's why we shouldn't be specific. But the real guidance is to attempt to problem solve in a way that clearly hadn't happened yet. That's really all this is about.
Thank you, Paula. Commissioner Linville.
I just couldn't help myself. The meeting was coming to an end. So I would just like to build a little bit on what both Diane and Paula said. It seems to me what might be helpful is a post grazing season meeting that the public can listen in on, that talks about lessons learned while they're still fresh, and get those sort of documented. And if anybody has any ideas, and then do a pre-season meeting also available to the public, so that we can talk about these, enhanced resource areas. Where do we think we're going to need to maybe spend a little bit more money? Where do we think we're going to have to spend a little bit more person power? And why I think that's important is because I think these conversations happen within the department, but the public doesn't get to see that or know that's going on. And then it's as though, we get into the grazing season and there are some non-lethals on the ground, but then we're moving to lethal, and people are left with the impression that, other things weren't considered. And so I think, as sometimes complicated as that is, I think daylighting that process could really lead to minimizing some of the, sort of armchair quarterbacking. And that's the only sports analogy you'll ever hear me use in my entire life, that we see when it is time to appropriately move to lethal. People need to know that everything was thrown at it before we moved to that step, and that it was thoughtful and happened before it was too late, to the best of everybody's abilities. So I think this section, I'm in big support of changing, of talking about it as an enhanced resource area. And a resource is lessons learned, resources, money, resources are the non-lethals we're already using. And I heard mention earlier about, if taking into account if anybody else in the public has ideas, so that, this is clearly not a species that we're going to be able to manage just sort of like status quo. So I think daylighting these meetings, and I know these Zoom meetings aren't perfect, but it does seem to allow to have, hate to say this, but more meetings, and that more people can attend. And I think that that's beneficial. We should use that to our benefit. So thanks for your hard work on this. And I just want to say real quick too, because I'm going to say this every time I'm in front of WAG, is that the objective is long-term recovery of wolves in the state of Washington, and you all and the state, we are meeting that. We are getting there. We are accomplishing that goal. And I just want to always be the person that says that out loud, that you are accomplishing that goal. And I appreciate your hard work for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And it sure is good to hear your voice again at a WAG meeting. So thanks for sharing. I have Julia's hand up, and then I'd like to ask if we maybe wrap it up after Julia's comment, unless a member feels a need to add to it. But Julia, go ahead.
This is probably like, if this was the last comment, this is bad because it opens up a can of worms. I love what you put forth, Commissioner Linville. I think that's a great idea. I think so much of there's always going to be angst around this issue, but I think there is nobody understands how much work goes into these decisions and how much they really are thought out and how much people are working on the ground to do everything they possibly can to prevent these things from happening in the first place. So I love the idea of having meetings like that and making them available to the public so that folks don't just have to hear about it, they can see it for themselves. However, I know that sometimes having meetings be open to the public makes some hesitant to participate. And so an open question to livestock producers is, and so many livestock producers, you know, who we work with are not members of WAG. And I wonder if they would be hesitant to be part of a public meeting that is about their operation and is about things that are going to be happening on their pasture or their allotment, wherever, and putting themselves in the limelight when they may not want to be there. And then also, we still haven't really addressed this question of, I think it sounds like this idea keeps coming up over and over. Have we ever had the land managers, the range riders, the producers, the staff, everybody in the room to talk about these things? And again, what if folks just refuse and say, you know what, I'm not going to do that? So again, that's where the department looks for guidance. What do we do if we aren't able to get cooperation there? And again, yeah, I wonder if the meeting being public might make some folks not want to participate.
Thank you, Julia, and all good things for us to consider. I'm sure this discussion is to be continued. I'll be looking to you, members, your advice in the intake calls on how we best take advantage of November. So once again, thanks for your time, your thought, your dedication on this topic. But I think it's time, we're out of time. So I'd like to go around to everybody again, just to check out with you before we adjourn. So with that, let's just, I think we'll just keep the same order here. So Dan, Paul, a chance to check out. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks everyone for the good work today, and I look forward to speaking with everyone in November.
Thank you, Dan. Don Dashiell. I see your number, Don, but I don't hear you. All right, well, sorry about that. If you do pipe, come on, just interrupt us and we'll hear from you. Lisa, are you still connected? Wow, I'm only 1 for 3 right now. So Lisa, we can't hear you. Paula.
Yeah, I just really appreciate everyone's listening to each other and patience and working through this and everyone's contributions. So even though I have a slight bit of frustration, but it's not really directed at anybody. This is just a hard issue. So I really do appreciate how everyone's grappling with it. And I am very happy to see the commissioners listen and participate today. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, Paula. Bill?
Well, I think it was sort of a productive day and stuff. I appreciate all the input, especially from Caitlin and Lynn being new. I know what it's like to be new on this committee and right in there. And there are no real easy answers. That's why we're spending so much time with it. So till next time, goodbye.
Thank you, Bill. Dave, how are you doing? Oh, you're muted, Dave. I can see you moving to unmute yourself. And just trying to buy you a few extra seconds here. Maybe I could do it for you, Dave. Let me see.
Yeah, we can only ask them to unmute themselves.
Oh, okay.
And I usually prompt that.
All right, Dave. Well, we still see you're muted. Again, once I see you unmuted, I'll be glad to check in with you. Lynn.
also want to thank everybody for their comments, and the subgroup was looking for and still is looking for tweaking of the framework we put together. And, we understand everybody isn't going to be completely satisfied with the language, but we can finish working on it at the next meeting. We've got a lot to think about. A lot of good points were made today. And I also want to acknowledge the work that Julia and Candace have done. They did meet with us, and their input was invaluable, and I want to keep hearing from them, and also other conflict managers out in the field who can help us be real about what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And Dave, I think we can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable than I was this morning. Kind of liked what Molly said. I think we should not overlook the last sentence or two where she talked about a goal. I mean, we really need to have a goal, and it needs to be a very simple goal that connects with this. I know that was the big deal when we went through Monastash, a very simple goal of what we're trying to do here, because I'm somewhat confused as to just that.
Thank you, Dave. Sammy.
Yeah, I think just like Lynn said, we were looking for input to try to tweak it. I've got a short list of notes, and Julia's got some notes made, and we'll bring it back to November and rehash it. But understanding where we're at, and I think maybe reiterating that goal and having that goal listed is what we need to do. Make sure that we're making this section as tolerable as it can be for both sides, because I think tolerable is probably the fair word, because I mean, even in our subgroup, Lynn and Lisa and I have hashed it out, so we've got to make it so both sides can live with it. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sammy. And I want to take the opportunity to thank the subcommittee again for taking the initiative, putting something together, asking for a meeting rather than wait for another month. So I appreciate that energy there. Diane.
I too want to thank the committee. I think you took a really thoughtful approach to this, and I really appreciate the opportunity to hear people's thoughts this morning. I really need to reflect on things, and so this was really helpful to hear concern people had to prepare us for some decision making in November. So great job.
Thank you, Diane.
And thanks too for the facilitation, Rob. I felt like today there was more dialogue between people that I think enhances our decision making, and it felt more like the process we're used to. So that was great.
Oh, thanks, Diane. Jessica.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I feel like we did make some good progress today, and that feels good. So yeah, looking forward to November.
Thank you. Tom?
So this may surprise you, but everything Paula said, I agreed with in her closing comment.
Did you capture that, Katie? Is that in the notes now?
I want that in the notes. Hey, and you know, I'm such a linear thinker trying to get from point A to Z that in my initial comments, I forgot so rudely to welcome Caitlin to the group. So my apologies, Caitlin, but it's nice to have you on board, and look forward to working with you. And the subcommittee as well. Appreciate the work. That's extra time on your hands to put into this, and we appreciate it, because it helps our discussion. I think, going to Diane's point, I think it helped focus our conversation here today in a more productive way, rather than kind of meandering all over. So thank you. And to the staff, once again, appreciate all the work that you folks are all putting in, both in the field, but also in the office to work on issues like this. You know, this is a clear display of the art of compromise. And as you look at, if you have the stomach to watch TV news or just read what's going on in our country, you know, we really are a prime example of what's needed is people who can sit down and have a respectful conversation, even when you don't fully agree on all the issues, but we can walk away with a handshake and work together in the future. And I just so appreciate all that you folks do collectively, what we do collectively, and to be part of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I think Donnie is still engaged or still, trying to help his children. So I don't think he's on. Julia.
Ditto to what Tom said. Every time I hear from WAG, it's an example of what can be done. And yes, it's slow and painful at times, but we really all have to sit down and recognize each other and see each other as human and work toward compromise. I want to thank Sammy and Lisa and Lynn and Candace, but especially Sammy and Lisa and Lynn, because I think we met, I don't know, 3 times, 4 times. We put in hours of work and having hard discussions on our own as a smaller group. And, I know that that's not easy. It's extra volunteering of your time, and it's opening up in yet another way for WAG. So I just really appreciate you all and the hard work that you did to come to an understanding with one another. So thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Steve?
Thanks, Rob. And boy, it's a pleasure to be able to follow my esteemed colleague, Mr. Davis, after he was so eloquent with his words. And so I don't need to repeat anything. I thought that was very well said, Tom. Appreciate your comments. And just maybe to help us for the November meeting, Rob, maybe just a clarification then. So is the expectation that the subcommittee will work to provide something, revision in advance of the November meeting, so that that could be a new starting point for the discussion, or a continued discussion based on a revised proposed Section 9? Is that the intent? And then what about a timeline for that? Is what's realistic for the subcommittee, and still have an opportunity for WAG members to be able to prepare for that discussion in November? So sorry, it's not as much of a checkout as it is a.
But it sounded more like an assignment, Steve. And we kind of put the committee on the spot there. How about subcommittee maybe give you some time, a couple days to talk and see if that's doable and what timeline's reasonable. And Julia, how about I use you as my contact with the subcommittee, and we'll communicate and see if we can see what we can do. Steve, how's that?
Great, thanks. I just thought that might be helpful for the group to know kind of next steps prior to November. So
if I can, I think our subcommittee's intention was to go through these revisions and have it back to the group for the November meeting. I mean, I think, right? I mean, subcommittee that shake their head, like I that was the intention of having this now, was
Reasonable to me.
Get back through it.
The only thing is, like, did folks get in the comments they wanted? Because I have everything that we all talked about during this meeting, but if there's more, obviously it won't be in there unless you send it to us.
All right, thank you, Sammy. I didn't see any of your subcommittee members object, so I think, thank you for that answer.
I didn't see Lisa shake her head either, saying no, we can't do that. So
That's because you didn't see my head shake at all. I came back, Sam, in time to hear that
one. Candace.
I like going towards the end for sure, because I had some questions and so about direction for the subcommittee, but I think we have enough. And I do want to thank, definitely, like Julia said, sorry, Sammy and Lynn and Lisa, because they did work through it really quickly. And that's nice. That fits my anxiety to work through things and check things off the list. So I appreciate that. So looking forward to kind of shoring stuff up and answering some of the questions that you guys had and trying to incorporate your perspectives.
Thank you, Candace. Joey?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I guess, kind of towards the end, I was a little frustrated. I guess in my mind, I'm trying to figure out how the department can be more transparent. So I think if you knew how many meetings that our staff and myself have with producers, Forest Service, NGOs, you name it, year round. And yeah, how to make that more transparent, because we do a ton of that. So there's a lot of thought that goes into all our decisions. So I'm just thinking about how to be more transparent.
Thank you, Joey. Scott?
Yeah, good meeting. It's always interesting to watch WAG work through these kinds of things. You can do this fast or you can do it well, but I don't think you can do both. And I think taking the time to get it right is important. That said, I think processes like this, it's always a challenge not to sacrifice the good in pursuit of the perfect. So I would just urge folks to keep working on it. I think Sammy's kind of got the right mindset that, trying to find something that will work for everybody and sort of makes sense. But it's not going to feel like, exactly what you want, probably. So anyway, keep at it.
Thank you, Scott. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks. So last half hour or so, my connectivity has been a little tough, so I missed a few things, but I'm kind of where Joey is. It does strike me that given all of the work that department staff do on this, it just seems like there's a general lack of awareness about the amount of outreach that we try to do. So we either need to do more outreach or, like Joey said, we need to figure out how to be more transparent. But great discussions today. I've appreciated being able to watch what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Caitlin, your first meeting. How you feeling?
Feeling good. I was glad to be a part of it, and thank you all for your time, especially the subcommittee.
Thank you, Caitlin. Great to have you again. Katie, our fearless note taker, do okay today?
Doing good. Happy to be able to be a part of this again and just hear all of your input. I think it's worth saying that there's a lot of people who may not be willing or able to put yourselves in your shoes. And I think that the work you do is really important, representing your constituents. So really appreciate being able to just hear all of it and go through these notes again and refresh everything. It goes by so quick. So just acknowledge all the hard work you guys do. And just from an outsider perspective, really appreciate and see all of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Then Commissioner Linville, I think you're our lone commissioner right now, but how are you today?
I just love being back with y'all. It was a good afternoon for me. I just want to echo, how I feel like this subcommittee did a great job, and I appreciate their hard work and the department staff that helped them. And to kind of address what Joey and Kevin, frustration are, that's kind of what I was trying to get at, like a sort of a one-stop shop for transparency. And so if there's anything I can do to help foster that, please let me know, because I know that work is going on, and we are not in an era, especially in this state, I feel, where we can just say, I'm from the government, trust me, we did this, right? And it doesn't fly in this state. And so don't get me wrong when I want you to understand that I understand trust me, there's things on the commission that I wish nobody was watching so that I could just say all kinds of inappropriate things. But that's not where we're at. That's not where we're at with natural resources in this state. And so anyways, I just wanted to acknowledge that I know that that was not a small ask, saying let's have these meetings being transparent. And I know they're time consuming, and I know there are going to be people who don't want to get on board with that. So just acknowledging that. And if there's anything I can do to help, I'm really happy to.
Thanks, Commissioner. And again, it's good to see you at the WAG too. So thank you for being here. I'm going to use my checkout to jump on the Great Job Subcommittee bandwagon. You know, Diane, you mentioned that this was more like the process you remember with WAG. I think a lot of it is because the subcommittee put together a product, got it to us a month ahead of time, gave us time to think about it, and had a nice start point for us. So just wanted to just jump on that bandwagon. So thank you again, subcommittee. All right. Well, great seeing everybody. I'll be in touch shortly as we prep for November, and I wish you all a wonderful day.
Thanks, Rob.